Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Bernier. I'm the owner of Flashbulb Memories Photo Booth here in Arizona, and we provide photo booth rentals for high-end weddings and events. And basically we've used Tave for pretty much since the start of our business, at least for the past 5 or 6 years, and it's been great, holds pretty much everything that we need. However, the problem that we've had ever since the beginning is how to get that data out of Tave into things like our scheduling programs or using it on our calendars when we have more complicated events that have custom fields, and basically just allowing more flexibility outside of what Tave offers. And this video is going to cover essentially how to use a feature in Tave that you may or may not have heard about before, which is Webhooks, to get data out of Tave and using a tool like Zapier to essentially spit that data into any other program that you want and allow you a ton more flexibility and use of what you have currently in Tave. So this is going to be a multi-part video just because there's so much to be covered, but this first part of the video is just going to be diving into Tave, the webhook functionality, and how to actually set these webhooks up and their triggers so that you can effectively use that data. And likewise, how to initially set up a zap in Zapier that will allow you to process that webhook data. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I've got Tave open here, and the first thing, this video assumes that you do have a basic understanding of Tave. If you're just getting started, this may not be the best video to watch, but if you go back and you've started to take jobs and learn how to use custom fields in Tave, then you might want to revisit this later. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to visit settings here, and we're going to go over to the right where it says advanced and automations. As you can see, I've got a lot of automation set up, but we're going to just create a new automation here, and we're going to give this a name. I'm going to call it webhook when lead turns to job, or webhook when job booked. Doesn't matter what you name it, just so you can find it. We're observing, in this case here, a job milestone booked. So if we have a lead that's in Tave, obviously they're not, it's something that needs to be scheduled, but when they turn into a job and they're actually on the calendar, or we want to get them on the calendar, that's when that data will be useful for us. So you pick whatever trigger makes sense for you. We're going to execute this immediately. And you can go ahead and enable this because it's not going to hurt anything having that data spit out. We're just going to go to Actions, New Action. And this is where we choose Web Request as the action to perform. So you're going to get this blank area called Post URL. And so essentially what's happening within this web request is we're telling Tave that when a job gets marked book, we want to post whatever data that we're spitting out here to a URL of our choice, which we'll get to in a second, and that will spit out all that data essentially in a raw format that we can then use, reformat, and use later. So to get this post URL, we're going to go into Zapier. Now, if you're not familiar with Zapier at all, this is your first time using it, you might want to spend some time going over Zapier help tutorials, videos, etc., so you get a better understanding of how that works. So this video does assume you've at least, played with Zapier before, but I will still go slow and it should be easy enough to follow, at least for this initial part of it. So we're going to create a zap, and the first zap that we're creating here, and probably the only one for this video, is going to be a webhook. So if you just type in webhook, sometimes it's right here on the right, you'll see it as well. We're going to select that. Now you'll notice it says premium, so you do have to have a special level of subscription to Zapier, which there is a cost for it. In my opinion, once you get this set up with just Tave alone, it will 100% justify that cost, but there's so many other things you can do with Zapier as well, so if you don't have that, you will have to actually subscribe in order to make this work. For the trigger event, we're going to do catch hook and continue. And you're going to see we get this custom webhook URL. So go ahead and copy that, come back into Tave, and paste that URL. So this is going to be the same constant URL, and basically, again, anything in Tave that we choose from these fields will get updated to this URL, which Zapier will process, and we'll be able to see in just a moment how that works. So we can continue on this screen here, and we're just going to let this sit. We're not going to test the trigger until we've got some data to send over. So let's go back to Zapier. I'm sorry, back to Tave. Now to finish building out this URL, you're going to do something here. You're going to put a question mark at the end, and then you're going to basically be able to start adding fields. But first we need to give whatever field we're adding a name so that we can identify it later. So for instance, I might want to get my bride's first name. That's something important that I want to see. So I'm going to put bride's F name equals, and then I can choose that token from within Tave right down here. So we have additional bride. Let me see if I can find the bride. Here we go, bride and first name. So this is the actual Tave token for that field. That's going to pre-populate that because we just clicked it. Now I'm going to add some more fields. So that one is bride's first name. Now let's add another field. I'm going to do the and sign. And then we're going to do, let's do bride's L name equals. And you'll notice I'm putting this little character as the space. We don't want to use actual spaces because otherwise that will break the URL. So make sure if you are wanting to space out words that you use something like this, the underscore, so that you can break those out. And then we'll go ahead and select it from the drop down again. Make sure we're under bride, and I'm going to look for bride last name. Perfect. And now I'm just going to add a few more of these fields. I'll do the and sign again. One important one for our business and probably yours as well is to have the job ID. And so that actually tells you, what job that is that was booked based on Tave's assignment of those. So I'm going to look for job, and somewhere in here, alphabetical order, ID. Perfect, job ID. And I'm going to go ahead and add just maybe one more for the sake of this demo. And we have a dress code for various events. I'm going to put dress code equals. So you can see here, this is a custom field that I set up in Tave. You can do that in the settings under custom fields. But as you can see, you can pull over any kind of field, whether it's built into Tave or you want to set it up custom. And actually, let me do two more here. I'm going to do event date, start date, because you might have a start date and an end date like we do, equals start date. Now you can see I've got calls, meetings, photo booth events, primary sessions, and sessions. So in my case, all of these will be under a primary session. We only have one session. It's basically the wedding or birthday or whatever it is. We don't do in-between sessions for that same job. So just check whatever it is for your case. You might have your main event here or a photography session or whatever else. But I'm going to choose primary session as my start date. And one more, we'll do the and sign. And I will say event start time equals. And likewise, we're going to choose from that primary session start time. Okay, so now we've got a pretty decent URL here, which will give us the bride's first name, last name, the job ID, dress code, start date, and start time. So I'm going to go ahead and just save and continue. And save and continue again. And so you can see this is the one that we just created, webhook when job booked. And you can see over here to the right, it's run 0 times, never executed, essentially. And the reason for that, excuse me, so this is run 0 times, never been executed. If we open it up again, the trigger is job milestone booked. So if we go into our leads, for this to work, we have to have a lead that gets turned into a job. So I've created a test lead here, new wedding test. And you can see I filled out some of the custom fields that would be prepared in the questionnaire to the bride and groom, for instance, including some fake names here. We have a date, and if we look at the schedule, we also have on the schedule a venue and the start and end times. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this lead as booked manually just by clicking booked. Normally this would happen automatically once they pay their bill and sign the contract and all. Perfect, so now this lead is a new job, and if we go back into Tave's automations, I'm just going to go, actually we'll start from the settings, automations. You can see right here, webhook when job booked has run a single time just moments ago. And if you want to look at the history, you can get an in-depth look at this, but that ran at 1:57 p.m. because it passed the conditions of the job being booked. So now, this is the fun part, back in Zapier, if we test this trigger and you followed along, you should get information that we see here. Basically, all of those fields that I had filled out, bride's F name, so we know that that's the bride's first name, bride's L name, that's her last name. And as you can see, that is the reason that we essentially put these field names in here so that they would be identifiable to us, so that this date wouldn't just show up and we don't know, is this the start date, the end date? We've labeled it. Now, you can see right here on job ID, I might have messed that up because it's all one thing here and it doesn't actually give us the ID at the end. So before I continue any further, I'm going to go back into Tave and I'm going to open up that webhook and I'm just going to edit that action and check that job ID area. So where did I put job ID? Here we go. And job ID, so there's the problem. I forgot an equal sign. So you always have to have the same format in order for this to work. So I'm going to put an equal sign. We have and job ID equals, and then there's our job ID token. So I'm going to save and continue. Now the problem here is this job's already been booked. So as you can see, we still only have one execution of this event. It's the same one that we're looking at here. So the question is, how do we get new data to come in after the job's been booked? Super easy. We go back into automations, and as you can see, I've got a lot more set up here. The easiest way to do this is just click duplicate on that same automation you just made. Give it a new name for whatever you want it to be. In this case, I advise actually creating maybe several of these, 3, 5, 6, whatever you like, whatever you prefer. But I'm going to have it be, for the sake of this demo, webhook when task updated. So if we choose the observing task completed, so I'll do task completed actually, what this is going to allow us to do is we can go into that job and on the task list, we can check off any given task and it will, once checked off, push the data again to Zapier. So essentially anything in Tave, that is the source of truth, and every time data is pushed to that webhook, it will update the fields that were previously sent. So you want to be sure to have the latest data in Tave, and that will allow you to use the latest data anywhere else and continue updating that outside. So I'm going to go ahead and save and continue. And I'll open this job back up. I have another tab for it here. I'll go to tasks. If you don't have a task list, you can just make a new one. Just call it test. It doesn't really matter. And then add a new task under it, under that test for task. Perfect. So we'll check this box. Again, it doesn't matter which one you check. I'm going to go back into automations and just refresh this. Now, if this worked, we should see webhook. Let me find it. Task completed. Here it is. Okay, so it wasn't marked as enabled, so let me go ahead and enable that, and I'm going to try that one more time. So I'll just check off a new task here for test again. Go back into automations, look at the history, and here we go. Just executed right now, 2:01 p.m., the exact time. So if we go back into Zapier, you can see this is the original job ID, didn't really format that the right way. So I'm going to click the drop down, and I'm just going to reload this. So request B was loaded 1 second ago, so that's the latest one. We'll choose that. And there we go. Job ID is now formatted correctly. That's the job ID in Tave. Everything else looks good. So I can go ahead, actually, you know what? Looks like we have one other issue. The event start time is doubled here. So let me go back into that webhook. And let's just check once again that action. As you can see, this is why it's important to spend time here on that action, because once you have this built out, you can duplicate it over and over for the various triggers, but you want to make sure that this is right to begin with, because if it's not, it's going to keep messing it up every time one of those triggers happens. So let's see what I missed. Event start time equals primary session start time. Aha, it's in there twice. So let's delete one of those because we don't need two of them. Looks like it's in there 3 times. Let's delete that one too. Okay, event start time, primary session start time, that looks good. I'm going to copy this because I have to update that original webhook too. Save and continue. which is webhook when job booked. And I'll just paste this in here so that we have the same webhook. Now let's try for a third time. We'll go back into that job that we have. I'm going to just add another checkbox here just so we can push that data. We'll go back into our automations and make sure that that was pushed, which looks like it passed, that worked. And we'll go back into Zapier and we'll refresh this request one more time. And now everything looks perfect. So hopefully that helps with kind of some troubleshooting. That was actually not intentional, but you'll definitely run into some issues, so that should give you a better idea of how to fix those issues. So then when we hit continue, that's basically all there is to getting that data into Zapier. And at this point, you can do whatever you'd like with it. So as you can see, there's 4,600 plus apps that you can connect. One of the things that we use in our business is Google Sheets and Google Calendar. That allows us to actually send this data into an area that we can mark employees on the schedule just by their name or email, get them a calendar invite, and keep it updated on our business calendar as well as the employee calendar. And it'll allow all of the data in Tave to populate on that calendar event so that it takes care of scheduling and it also keeps them up to date on everything without actually needing to give that employee access to Tave or any financial data of that sort. So I will be covering that in a future video. There's just a few more things I want to wrap up here with so that you are comfortable basically creating these and managing these zaps. So one of them is going back into Tave and going into automations again. So again, we've got the task job milestone booked and the task completed. Another automation I recommend setting up is we'll go ahead and duplicate the job milestone booked one. Personally, I recommend doing something like job date. So we have job primary session and executing at various intervals. So for instance, we get a lot of last minute updates, day of changes, week of changes, whatever it is. So one automation I'll have in here is one day. Oh, we might have to do a little bit different here. The day before, here we go. So the day before that actual job date, it will process that webhook, spit the data out to Zapier, and however you have it set up in Zapier after that, we'll update it accordingly so that you'll always have the latest information, as in our case, on our calendars, and our employees will always have the latest up-to-date information on what they need to pack, be prepared for, etc. So I'll name this one day before job, and I'll just say webhook push data. And if I save this, then I would essentially recommend duplicating that again, setting up another one, but instead of one day before, maybe make it 1 month before, maybe have another one for 6 months before, depending on how up to date you want to keep your data. This will allow that to process automatically without you having to go in and mark a checklist as completed. But the checklist is a quick option for testing it and pushing the data on the spot. As you can see, it all happens instantly, so it's a very effective way to have it as a backup option. Now back in Zapier, something to keep in mind here. So on the catch hook, you can, again, using the Tave automation, custom fields, etc., you can make this as long as you want. You can have 100 fields that get pulled over, and when you see those fields, you don't have to do something with all those fields. They can just be there and non-used, or you can have just the fields that you need. But essentially spend more time building out that Tave, that long webhook URL, and it'll make your life easier in Zapier when you want to reuse that. So one of the things that I have set up in Zapier is the Google Sheets integration, which again we'll cover in a different video. But before that, you also have these options on the side. So you can actually format the data that comes out of Tave before you get it into another app, which sometimes you'll need to do in the case of dates, times, which may be needing to be formatted in a 24-hour format instead of 12-hour format, or in the case of the fields like internal notes, public notes, etc. Those get kind of jumbled with HTML, and this formatter will actually allow you to modify the data that comes in before you spit it out to the app of your choice. So I recommend looking into some of that and playing around with it. We'll cover it a little bit in a future video as well, but I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and let me know. Thanks.